What's up, YouTube family? I'm back at you like I'm mad at you. Back at you with another one, family. And this one, family, I want to just give you a little story time based on how I got to this place, family. I want to talk about why I speak about, I reference the Bible a lot. I speak about manifestations, things that the Bible speak about, right? Spiritual things. I talk about God and Most High and all of those kind of things. But I found myself in this place where um, I'm not a Christian or I'm not, this or that. And I want to just kind of give you a little story time about myself and how it led to this place um, and the way that I, perceive spirituality and so forth. So um, it's quick, it's brief as I can sum it up for you, family. I started out Chicago, of course. That's where I'm from, Chicago, right? South side of Chicago initially. Um, I was very, I had a handful of other siblings. I was very active and running around and in the neighborhood at a very early age. Um, of course, I was surrounded at that time. It was lot more poverty. It still is, but it was even more. It was even worse then. Uh, in that back then, what I'm saying, $5, in other words, is more than $5 today. Um, I had a um, definitely I had a thing for baseball. I liked baseball when I was young. Played for Washington Park Redskins. I was a pitcher for Washington Park Redskins, and I used to like just being a kid. I I do remember having a certain kind of you know thought process of being aware of what was something called God and all that. But my mother at that time was not like in the church all the time. I was obviously had been to church, but we wasn't like necessarily growing up in the church or nothing like that. My mother didn't get um, saved until I think she was like 40, 40 over 40 maybe. And so yeah, it was just kind of like um, uh, uh, it was to me, I knew I was in a povertized neighborhood. I knew I was familiar with gangs and all that because I was kind of surrounded by it. But I looked at that like at the time, like that's life. Like I was born into it like that. So I figured this would happen. This what the world consists of, right? And but I remember not liking, like I really had a moment when I was very young about. I think this was the time that I remember to be like think any kind of spiritual way when I was young. Outside of not cursing when we walked past the church, that was a thing. Like to not curse when you walk past the church buildings. But I remember just being kind of like uh, discouraged and displeased with poverty and the kind of conditions that we lived in on the south side. Although my mother did a great job with the way she poured into me, spoke for me, and also provided for me, I still was able to differentiate um, fortunate from unfortunate. And it was just, I remember a day I ran in the house after being outside playing, and I had, you know, if you ever go out sometimes and you go do stuff and then we stayed in these buildings where there's always like 3 floors, and it was a time where, I don't know if you know what it's like to be out and then kind of like, forget once you got to go back home. Like, oh man, now I gotta go back to normality or go back to, um, less than right or whatever you may have described it as. In my way, I described it as something that was like, just conditions that I wasn't always happy to. And I mean in my neighborhood, not necessarily in my apartment, my mother's apartment or whatever, but it was just, when I'd go out somewhere else and come back, I'd be like, hey, I was reminded, in other words, I was reminded of the conditions, right, of that particular neighborhood and that particular time in life. So I remember just running in the house after playing and feeling a certain kind of way about that. Like man, this is like why we gotta be poor. You know, that's how I felt. You know, I ain't really like that. I went out to the porch, sat back on the porch. I remember sitting on the porch, and I remember like, you know, I don't know if y'all remember, any of y'all remember XJ900s. I had some XJ900s on, right? And sometimes I would get like other shoes and stuff like Nikes and stuff, but I had some XJ900s on. I remember picking my foot up and kind of like messing with my shoe, and it was like a little bug or something that crawled, you know what I'm saying, from under the bottom of my shoe or something. I was just kind of blown by that. You know, that made me feel a little bit more, I don't know, I guess it made me feel a little bit more conscious of conditions. When you're at a young age, sometimes you don't know no better. But at that point, I just felt like, you know what I'm saying, the environment that I was in, right, infested with drug dealers and, you know, junkies and all of that kind of stuff. I just was kind of like, man. And I remember having like a little emotional moment, right? I remember getting emotional and I prayed, you know what I'm saying? I remember specifically saying, if there is a God, you know, why we gotta be poor? Like I was having that kind of moment, like, you know, whether you want to call it a prayer or not, I'm sure it was a form of communicating with the Most High. And I was like, man, why this, you know what I'm saying? And I remember being like a little emotional about it. I wasn't drenched in tears or nothing, but I was definitely upset. And I was like, man, why we gotta do this? You know what I'm saying? I can't do this. And I remember saying, like, when I get older, I gotta do whatever I gotta do, God. I remember talking like that. You know what I mean? That's part of what led me to the next part of the story, is how, you know what I'm saying, I ended up in the streets and all of that, right? So I had that moment. I remember that moment. I remember a time when I was, you know, on a balcony. We had a balcony where my mother let us go out and be on the balcony, and she'd buy these cases of sodas, like cream soda and all that. Back then, they was, you know, like, I don't know if they came from Aldi's or whatever, but they used to be like cases of pops, right? Different colors. They had orange, purple, and all that cream soda. And I remember just, we was running back and forth, you know, me and my siblings running back and forth on the balcony and running in and out the house. But this particular time I ran out on the balcony by myself, you know, because it was pretty much connected to the living room. So we'd be in the living room and could just walk out there at any time. And it was pretty much, you know, a rail around it. Like, you know, it was a porch you couldn't get off of or just slip off of without actually climbing up the railing. And I remember being out there, man. I looked over the balcony, and there was a man, a poor, I guess a homeless man rather, right? A homeless, I won't say poor, but look, appeared to be a homeless man. Well, it was nighttime too. I remember it was dark outside, and had to be warm out because we was running in and out a lot. I remember you know, I didn't have no coats and all that, but running in and out, and I looked over the bell, I saw the guy just walking past with a cart, you know. In the city, y'all already know, in different big cities, a lot of times you see a lot of homeless people on the streets. The guy was walking by with a cart, a food cart from the grocery store, and he was just kind of like walking slow, walking past with the grocery cart. And I remember, I couldn't be no more, because my mother moved from the south side to the east, right? Eventually. But at this point, I couldn't have been no more than 6 years old, because I know I was 9 when my mother moved, right? And I remember kind of how little I was to the extent. But I couldn't have been no more than like 6, in between like 5 and 7 maybe. But I'm thinking around 6. I saw the guy just walking by. He had a few things in his cart. And I remember I don't know, as a child, I remember just, you know, having like an emotional response, right, to looking at the guy. I looked at him like, and I remember cringing, you know what I'm saying, on the inside. And I remember my eyes kind of watering up. And I didn't like that, right? So I went and grabbed a cream soda, where I told you about the pops, right? I went and grabbed it because we had a case of them sitting on the balcony. I went and grabbed a couple cans of sodas, and I said, hey, I called out to him, and I started throwing the sodas to him, trying to throw them in his cart. And I remember one of them hit the ground, splattered all over the place, and it was kind of like it bust, so it was the soda was like just squirting out. And so that's how I ended up throwing him another one, right? And I throw it to him. The other one fell in the cart and all that. I'm trying to get him a soda in a nutshell, right? And just wanted to give him some, but I knew I didn't like that, right? And it was very intimate moment dealing with my senses and my emotions and all that, because I was a kid. I just felt it. It was just an experience more than me understanding what was happening. I just knew the only thing I did know is that I wasn't pleased to see that. So I gave him the soda. He said, thank you, man, or whatever. He said, thank you somehow with short words, and he kept going. And I remember just, I felt, like after that, I remember feeling like, again, that kind of like that dialogue between me and the Most High, like, why is that like that? Why is, people out here suffering? I felt like it was unfortunate, it was unfortunate conditions, right? So that would be like my second like moment that I remember kind of like thinking like, if there's a God, you know what I'm saying? What is this? And at a very young age, I just remember having feelings about it. So I was in 5th grade, went to Burke Elementary. By the time that was right down the street, like 1 block away. By the time we moved, I was just graduating out of 5th grade, and I was about 9 years old. My mother moved east, where I was really raised up, right? When I really started to get involved and, experience different things off the porch, right? Different activities off the porch. So, I saw a lot of, commonality on the south side. When I got to the east side, I thought it was like moving up a little bit, because on the south side, there's a lot of buildings, a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of buildings. And although it's houses too on the south side, when I got to the east side, my mother was moving into a house. So it was different, like just seeing like more houses, a lot of houses in the neighborhood. And although it was also buildings on the east side, it just seemed more project like, on the south side. So for me, family, it was kind of like moving up, but lo and behold, shortly after moving there, I started getting accustomed to the gangs in that neighborhood and at school and different things that was going on in that area. So eventually, not long after, probably like 10 years old, I was still like into like bikes, dogs, I used to be getting, back trying to get dogs. I liked the dogs a lot. I always trying to ask my mama, let me have a dog. And sometimes when I go out and get my own dog, Same thing with the bikes, if you know what I mean, at that time, So, but my mama, sometimes she let me have a dog and bikes and stuff like this. I was mostly into bikes and stuff about 10 years old. I had friends that was in the gangs, and I was, just like on the south side, I was around them. They was, people was, my peers was talking about gang activity and gang things, but I would just, at that time in my life, I was just going along with things because I was still a kid. In my mind, I was just enjoying the things that I was really interested in, like the dogs, the bikes. And by the time I was like 12, 13 is when I started really like adopting the gang life, the gang, camaraderie and all of that. When I started adopting gang signs for real and indulging in, more nefarious activities like stealing, bikes and stuff like that. So, at this time again, my mother's still she not necessarily in the church, nothing like that. So I'm still, God and spirituality and all that is just at this point is still kind of like a little distant for me. I still don't have no personal relationship with it, and it ain't really too many around me that's tough. What I'm saying, on it either. So, it was a church on my block though. When I stayed on Calumet, it was a church on the south side in the middle of the block, right? And that was the church I meant. We walked past. We say, "Don't curse about it in front of the church." But when I used to go up in there, sometimes I would go to strangers' funerals and stuff like that. Sometimes just to eat their food, because we used to know that they used to cook and have dinners in the church for funerals and stuff like that. So we used to sometimes go up in there, me and my friends, and we go up in there and just when it's time to eat and stuff like that, right? Don't judge me, but it was just kind of like back then, we were just looking for stuff to do. But on the east side now, again, about 13, I'm starting to get into the gangs. Now, I mean, always somehow all my homies, right, was always older than me. Always, for the most part, they was always older than me. What I'm saying? Always a little more advanced in certain activities and all that, because my mother, even though she wasn't in the church early on, she always kind of like, is very significant that she always, God definitely used her, because she always was about doing what's right. She never allowed gang activity like in a home. Like, she wasn't open to like certain things. Like, she wasn't the type that was okay with you having girls over sleeping at a house or something like that, like sleeping with them or things like that. She wasn't that type of mom. She was always about us speaking, like knowing how to speak. She'd always say, "Hey, ain't no such thing as can't." She would correct us when we would speak, what I'm saying, when it comes to the English language and all that. Like, she always had that kind of like, I don't know, she was always about doing what was right. If it was some situations where we wasn't being nice, so to speak, or to somebody, or not, being respectful and all that, she would always check us on that kind of stuff. So, although she wasn't in in the church and all that, and into, she still had a way of like, being against evil in a sense, right? And so my mother was very experienced with the world around her, though. So she kind of knew a lot of the things that was going on in the world. And she was just, although she made her own mistakes like everybody else growing up, she was always about giving us another chance to do something different. So somehow that the seeds that she planted always stuck with me. But early on, again, on the east side now, I'm adopting the gangs around 12, 13. I'm starting to thinking I'm getting real seriously involved in the street life and all that. And I had some encounters. I had some encounters that as far as my life being at stake, being at risk with, when it came to jail, when it came to violence and all that. Because obviously in the streets, it's a lot of shooting and stuff like that. So I do remember one time when I was about 13, and I went to the Oddie home. It was on the left of Hamilton at the time. It's a place where it's like it's like a county for the youth, right? Before they turn 17, and or 16 or 17, yeah, and I remember when I was there, I was, afraid I was gonna be locked up for a long time, and I remember praying, right? This was a time where I was like praying to like, God, wherever you are, please, give me another chance, get me out of here, that whole story, right? I was very, I remember at times, cause jail ain't my thing. I remember being like this, this, I can't do this one, you know what I'm saying? Nobody should be able to think like they can, but I'm saying, I just remember praying out like, Lord God, or whoever you are, you know what I'm saying, get me out of this one, you know. So that was just another encounter. Like it was kind of like one of those things where I was turning to him in a time of need, as well as fear or worry and so forth. So, but I still had no relationship with him, and so I, make a long story short, I remember getting out of that situation, going back home eventually, some time later, you know, just months later, and I had got right back to the streets, got right back to, because I still stayed in the neighborhood at that time, so I remember pretty much getting right back to it. You know, my mother did make it clear to me, hey, you know, don't go out there, this ain't that. You know, she tried to let me know, like, find something else to do. But at that age, I couldn't register where my life was headed and all that. So I just kind of like, you know, I always knew she just telling me what's right. She can't thinking, you know, in my best interest. But at that time, I felt like what I was doing in the neighborhood was normal. That's how I used to think. I used to think that it was normal. I'm like, this is what everybody doing. You know, like, this is what all I saw, all I knew. I had yet even been out of Chicago, I don't think, right? So as far as just, you know, from what I can see, it was normal. And you know, when you're younger, it seemed more fun too, right? It wasn't as tough as it is now. Back then, although it was tough, it wasn't like how it is now. And of course, everybody wasn't, you know, weed is way different than, you know, pills and all of that. So anyway, make a long story shorter, I still hadn't had that relationship, so I'm back in the field a little bit, get more involved. That leads to you know, years going by where I'm just pretty much in and out the streets, right? In and out the streets. Didn't have a long criminal background, nothing like that. But I would get like little petty cases, catch like little petty cases, you know, like back then for stealing cars or, you know, obstructive justice, what do they call it? You know, like, you know, running from the police, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Nothing too serious, right? But I did, you know, found myself on probation, right? Things like that. Did end up catching a few cases when I started getting later in my teens, like 15, 16, you know, 17, where, you know, I was given like pats on my hand and probation and so forth to not go to jail. And then those were like the stepping stones to me, like even turning to God. And so that's why I want to throw that out there. Like, those was the stepping stones to me even turning to God, because I would find myself when I be in situations with them people, you know, I get, you know, be paranoid, like, and be praying, God, get me out of this one, right? I was one of those type. And so it was also a time too, like, to keep it a buck with you. It was also a time too, man, I don't know why we was doing this, but me and one of my buddies, when I was around 14, no, about 13, 14, we were walking through the opposition neighborhood. I don't know what we was thinking at this time, but I had a wig on. You know, we had khaki suits. We was wearing khaki suits back then. My homie pressed his, so his looked long, like how Snoop used to wear his, and mine was like a fro. And we had hats on them. You know, I mean, we was really just trying to have butters, because, you know, I used to have braids back then, but they wasn't long like these wigs was, right? So we both got on khaki suits and we got our hats turned, and we walking around at nighttime through the neighborhood where about 7 of these guys started chasing us, you know what I'm saying? I remember praying to God that night, you know what I'm saying? I remember praying to God that night because they was older guys. We was young. We was like, again, 14. And these guys had to be, you know, 30 plus, right? And I remember praying to God that night, you know. So situations like that would lead me to prayer, even though I had no understanding of the Most High, right? Or, you know, spiritual things. But when I was in those type of situations, I would reach out for something, right? In the form of praying to God. So it was just things like that began to develop a sense, right, of what God is and all that. So, or who God is, or, you know, where he is and all that. But I just knew it was somebody, right? And this whole spiritual thing was something that you can turn to and pray to God, to the extent in my mind, like that wherever you was, he was supposed to be able to hear you. You know what I'm saying? So again, that turned into, you know what I'm saying, I'm still out there. I still hadn't learned my lesson. I'm still, you know, running the streets a little bit. And that pretty much did that all the way up to about 19, 20 years old, family. You know what I'm saying? There's more storyline to that, but just to skip past that, though, all those years, I pretty much, you know, that kept going, just kept happening. Oh, and one other thing, like before my mother moved off the South Side, right? You know, I don't know if this was it was a reason for this or not, family, but I used to spend a lot of time in the backyard. We used to have a crate, you know what I'm saying, boarded up like for a basketball. I don't know if many of y'all remember shooting on a crate, but I remember being back there a lot and on the South Side before we moved east, and I remember for some reason, family, you know, I used to be out there all in the trees, messing with caterpillars and just messing around with stuff, just, you know, just exploring and stuff. But looking in the skies, I had this sense of kind of always looking for something else, you know what I'm saying? And for some reason, I used to thought I saw a UFO, right? How I know it probably wasn't a UFO now, and obviously, right, is because it said UFO, right? But for some reason, I remember thinking I saw a UFO when I was in the backyard in the daytime, looking up, and it went by. And I remember it was like a lighting on it, going in circles like this, and it said UFO, right? Now, I don't know how or why I saw this, but that right there did something to me spiritually. That's why I wanted to throw that in there, because I remember from that point when I really started thinking and believing it was something else out there, right? It was something else going on beyond just mere mankind. Because, you know, even when I used to tell that story to my relatives, different people growing up, they used to be like, yeah, you saw a UFO. And when I got older, I realized, well, you're right, it couldn't have been a UFO if it said UFO, right? And you know, those digital letters. But for some reason, I believe to this day it was a reason I saw that and thought like that. Because it also not only intrigued me, but it kind of opened my mind, right, to spiritual, to the possibilities of what else is out there, and to spirituality, right? It kind of opened me up to that, right, a little bit. And so, because I felt like I saw something that was, one, hard to believe, and two, I felt like I saw something that was a reflection of what's out there beyond the skies, like what's out there beyond what is easy to believe is out there, right? Sort of like spiritual things and God and so forth. So anyway, yeah, so about 19, I remember I had a lot of moments, you know, a lot of situations in the streets that was already kind of, I was beginning to change. Even though I was still out there, the more I got older, I was beginning to change my way of thinking, in a sense. Like, I didn't know it was going to be out the hood, but I wanted to do something different in the hood, right? It was like, I was starting to think like, man, I got to get rich. And you know what I'm saying? You know, I'm going to live in a suburb, but I'm going to just come drive to the hood. And, you know, I wanted to, it was a time where I can remember me wanting to do something a little different than just living in the neighborhood and, you know, being over there and dying over there or something. I kind of like, I had little stepping stones of growth where I wanted to do something different. And it was a stepping stone at a time. And so about 19, that's when I got in some real trouble, you know, messing around in them streets. And, you know, I pretty much was fighting, you know, the rest of my, you know, my life, right? So, you know what I'm saying? I had really began to pray when I got in that situation, right? By this time, because my mother had got saved when she was like 40 something. By this time, I kind of knew how to just like pray to Jesus, pray to God, right? Because I had been to church with OG a few times. So I understood what that was to the extent. And I was praying, obviously in that situation, I was, you know what I'm saying, shook up about it on the inside as far as how it was going to turn out. But, you know what I mean, you know, on a regular basis, I was the type of guy that was doing a lot of like self-development, right? Like this is what the Most High was leading me at the time. Like it was certain books coming to me that to this day I was like, man, it ain't no coincidence how that book came to me. You know what I mean? Like I had read The Secret, you know, by Rhonda Barnes, The Magic in Thinking Big, right? John McCormack, right? I remember these books coming to me, like somehow people even mentioning them, telling me like, you should read this, or somebody just giving them to me, like, here, read that, you know what I mean? And so, at this point, you know, my mother and them always write me and stuff, letting me know they praying for me, things like that. So, you know, at this point, I'm really like, you know, hoping God is real and holding on to something that can be, maybe my only, you know what I'm saying, option, right, in this type of situation to get me out of this situation. So I was really like, you know, reading more. I started, at a certain point, I would read the Bible, but at a certain point, I started reading a lot of other books. Like, you know what I'm saying, the Bible I would read, but I would read a lot of other books. In the Bible, I would read it, but I didn't always understand it. Because you know how the Bible is, you know what I'm saying? You kind of like, you got to know what it's talking about to get the drawing of the Bible. So I would read the Bible, but I wasn't always getting the understanding. I just, you know, but the other books like The Secret, right? The Magic and Thinking, those kind of books, right? I got all kind of books at that time. I started looking into electromagnetism and all that. I would be able to understand these books much clearer than the Bible. But I did feel good, right, reading the Bible. I did know that there was a sense of comfort came from reading the Bible, because I would read up on the promises. My mama always told me to read Psalm 91, read Psalm 91. And that was, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High shall rest under the shadow of the Almighty. That used to be my favorite scripture. So, you know, I'm in the county. I was in Cook County for like 4.5 years before I went to the joint. And you know, over that time is when I really truly, because now I'm getting older, family. So you got to think, I was like 19, 20 when I went in. Now I'm in my 20s pretty much, you know what I mean? And I'm getting older, you know what I'm saying, when I'm in there. You know, I went from 19 to my later 20s, and I'm getting into it to a point where I'm getting a little more drawn with certain scriptures. I'm getting a little more of a connection, you know what I'm saying, as far as I'm feeling this, you know, the presence in a sense, right? When they say the presence of God, I'm feeling it a little bit more. I'm feeling a sense of having a little bit more of a personal relationship in a sense, right? So, you know, I'm still reading other books, but I'm reading the Bible too. That's when my relationship with spiritual things and God and all that started to really develop. And my mother would always write me, right, saying, and my sisters would let me know they praying for me, things like that, make sure I'm praying and so forth. And, in the county, you know what I'm saying, they had what you call a Christian deck where the guys pray together, stuff like that. So at a certain point, I was around other like believers as far as God and Jesus, read Bible readers and toters that would pray, you know what I'm saying, together and all that. So my my personal relationship started to grow a little bit more each year and each year that I was in there, right? So I had some very significant moments, you know, that was kind of like, you know, like when I was in the county, they had spelt my name a little wrong. They was like a letter off, and then they had my birthday backwards. You know what I'm saying? And so, but this is on my ID up in there and everything. So I even had trouble sometimes getting my mail because they had mixed it up so bad. But it was a time where this officer pulled me out of my cell. This is on my birthday, right? This is on my real, true birthday. But on their records, mind you, they got a different birthday and all that because they had mixed it all up. But on my real birthday, right, the officer pulled me out one morning, like popped my door, boom, came to the door, told me, I need to talk to you. He brought me into the little triage thing, her little office spot, right, for the COs, and was like, man, it's just something been on my spirit about you. You know, she was just telling me like, you know, I think you really, you know, got a calling on you. She's like, I had to go to my, I guess a prophet lady, something about her spiritual advisor she turns to. She was like, I had to go to her about this because I was trying to figure out why was you constantly on my spirit. And then she got to talking about, like, she had a paper pamphlet. To this day, I'm kind of was displeased with some relatives why I can't find this pamphlet. But it was about this thick, talking about me being a prophet, something like that, right? She was just saying like, today is your new birthday. Now mind y'all, this is my real birthday, that day, right? But how could she have known that, right, if they had my birthday mixed up with their paperwork? So for some reason, she pulled me in the yard. She telling me this stuff. I'm sitting down. She's sitting on her desk. I'm sitting down like in front of her on the floor almost. And she was just breaking this stuff down to me, reading it out to me, telling me I got a calling on my life. I got to walk into my calling. And, you know, it has something to do with being a prophet or something like that. You know, hold on one second, family. Yeah, she said it has something to do with being a prophet or something like that. And that she said, pardon me. She said, you know, that it was heavy on her spirit. Her spiritual advisor was strongly advising me to take this serious and all this, and she was just going through a bunch of little things on the, you know, pretty much telling me about a calling that was on my life. You know what I mean? And that had very significant impact on me that day because she kept saying, consider this your new birthday. Today is your birthday. You know, it's for you to walk into your, from this point, you got to start walking into your calling and all this. Mind you, I remember like being like, man, how could this be on my real birthday? Significantly, she's saying all this, right? When the paperwork was jacked up. So anyway, you know what I'm saying? Again, I was starting to read a lot at this point and praying and so forth. But this was just another little icing on the cake, right? You know what I'm saying? To really get my attention to, you know, any relationship with the divine, so to speak, right? And I know I had left that meeting with her going back into my cell and all that, intrigued. I was very intrigued because I thought that was very significant. And the fact that she even came and pulled me out my cell and all that, did all that, I was just kind of like, man, you know, I had different little, you know, encounters where, you know, people would say little things to me sometimes, you know, because I like to encourage people, right? Like, even when I was, you know what I'm saying, in the streets and all that, you know what I'm saying, I wasn't no pessimistic type of guy. You know what I'm saying? If you going through something, I'd be like, man, this good, man. You know what I'm saying? All right, we're going to get over that too. You know, like I had a way of always doing that. And it was like a natural thing because I wasn't, it was just who I was. Like, you know what I'm saying? I had a sense of, remember when I told you about when I was on the south side and was praying about them povertized conditions. Well, by the time I was like moved to the east side and started being in the field and all that a little bit, like messing around in them streets, I remember a sense of richness came over me. And this is something that I believed, I really felt within. Like people talk about certain conditions or whatever, something they going through, something I'd be like, don't, you know what I'm saying, no, we're going to be rich anyway. It ain't going to even matter. Like, we're going to woo. Like, that was just my mentality. My mentality started to develop like that somehow. You know what I'm saying? I can't say how that happened, but it was like something that was planted in me to know that I wasn't too good at just accepting defeat, suffering, certain things like that. Poverty and all that. I wasn't with none of that at this. I was starting to, you know what I'm saying, was grown out of that or something. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, like, I just know I always had like a motivational side to me even then. So this lady was telling me, the CEO was telling me like, yeah, you know, you got a calling on you, know, something for you to help other people and all those other things. So, you know, again, I used to pray and all that, make a long story short. I remember at a certain point where I felt like it was more to that Bible, right? I used to be reading the Bible on my birthday. I would stay in the cell sometimes, right? Guys would come to my truck, like, come on, man, let's go cook, or let's go, let's do this. But I was kind of like, oh, I'm good. I don't even know what this was. It was like something came to me. Something started like drawing me in to where I would just start like, I wanted to know deeper about that Bible. I had sense that it was something that we was not really living with, according to what the Bible was talking about. I knew that, like, when you would read some of them scriptures, it talk about the power and the things that you can do, like you can speak to the storm and all these different things that shows what you're capable of, or what God is capable of through you, or what God was capable to do for you. All these things, like, I just felt like, I'm like, man, I felt like it was, I don't know, I had a side of me that felt like we was a people in the world that was going along with something that wasn't necessarily fulfilled. Like, it's like, I used to know there's more to it. And if I can grasp that, in my mind, it's like, if I can grasp what you, like, I used to wish I knew this guy personally. Like, 'cause I know you mean something different than we getting from reading it. I know it's something else that you getting from this. Like, that we, that I know it's something else that you want us to get from this. But reading it, everybody just saying, just pray. You know what I'm saying? Just pray. Or, that was it. Like, that was everybody's answer when it came to God, was just pray. It wasn't no, and when we truly know how to pray, that is a powerful thing. But I just knew it was something more than that the Bible was saying as far as what we were capable of. And anywho, it started drawing me in more and more to the point where I would literally like spend time just looking at a certain scripture, just trying to understand the deeper meaning of it, right? It's a scripture in the New Testament, family, that talks about the parable of the sower. It talks about, how for some, when he was sowing the truth, right? When he was sowing this blessing upon the souls of men, some of them wasn't getting it because of the thorns. They were talking about, some of them was worried about their life. They was worried about the world around, the worries of life. And it said, it is a part of, it says some were, they lacked deafness, right? They didn't have that deafness in them, right? To go deeper, in other words, right? I didn't necessarily recall the scripture back then, but I know that's what I wanted. I wanted to go deeper for some reason. I just knew it was something deeper, especially after reading those other books, like, The Secret and all that. I'm like, man, these scriptures are saying something. Sometimes, man, my whole reading would just be me looking at the same scripture over and over, trying to understand the depthness of it, right? And I would have days where I would just stay in a cell and just be like, on my birthday specifically, and I wanted to spend those days, kind of like knocking on the door. I guess you could say the video we talked about, you know what I'm saying, opening those doors. I was pretty much knocking, you know what I'm saying? Because I was seeking, I was asking, and I was trying to see, mentally see, right? Spiritually see a more deeper, you know, reality of this word, of what is true, right? And what God is talking about. So I would just pretty much do that for a few birthdays while I was in there, right? More so trying to just, you know, figure out what is it like, because I don't like lying to myself, you know what I'm saying? I'm one of them type of people, like, you know, I don't care, you know, I mean, I don't have no judgment towards nobody else and what you say to the world, but I'm big on don't ever lie to yourself type thing. You know what I'm saying? And I just one of them kind, like, after so long of praying, after so long of singing songs and, you know, reading the same scriptures and just saying God got your back, I felt like I just somehow something came to me and made me conscious or aware that it was much more to those scriptures than or to God and so forth than what I was getting, right? And what the rest of what most of the world was getting from it. So I had a lot of times, family, where I would just, you know, drift, right? I would be just as, you know, just as common as everybody else as far as my daily routines. But then I had a lot of times where I would really like digging deeper, right? And so this what really, really got realer for me when it came to that Bible and as far as what it was saying, what it was not saying. So make a long story short, I was in the county like 4.5 years, but about 3 years in is when I had I remember saying, like, you know, man, God don't owe me nothing, man. You know what I'm saying? He ain't finna get me out of here just because I'm reading the Bible and praying, and you know what I'm saying? I had a moment like this, family, where I was just like, I remember being thankful, right? I remember being thankful for you know, all that he done for me, like how he, you know what I'm saying, beginning to mature me and all that. And I was just kind of like, I was in a place where I was like, it wasn't a bitter place. I was in a place where I was like, I ain't really sweating it, you know what I mean? I just know it's something else because I knew it was something that we wasn't all the way unraveling when it came to the Bible and God and all that. So I just remember feeling like he don't owe me nothing. He ain't necessarily got to get me out of here and all that. And just because I'm in this Bible, you know what I'm saying? I saw a lot of people that was praying, you know what I'm saying, get booked, right? They got booked, you know what I mean, when it was time to get, you know what I'm saying, to go for trial or something like that. But I also saw a lot of guys that did get up out of there, right? They was praying and beat their cases, or they got short time and so forth. But I just knew the more I saw that, I think that played on me too, being there long enough to see a lot of guys go home and a lot of guys not go home. I remember like just releasing myself from that, right? Or being released from that, where I was just like, man, you know what I'm saying? The Most High ain't got to get me out of here, man. He ain't really necessarily owe me nothing. My mama used to tell me all the time to stay out them streets, you know what I'm saying? She begged me to find something different to do and all that, you know? And I thought about like how even, you know what I'm saying, God, like in a sense of, you know, just different ways where it was like, I was like, man, that was me that wanted to keep going into the streets, you know what I'm saying? So, you don't owe me nothing, man. I ain't got to, you know, And I remember just choosing, man, if my relationship with God didn't have nothing to do with me getting out of that jail, and that it wouldn't be I wouldn't base my feelings and all that on that, because I knew that, first of all, our understanding of what God is and what the Lord is and all those things, I was just kind of like, I ain't finna do all that, man. I kind of felt a sense of relief. I went until like was in a space where it was like, whatever gonna happen. And like shortly after that, that was like 3 years in. Shortly after that is when I started to make my way out of there, put it like that. That's when I started to get hope, right? That's when the time came, them offers came, right? Somehow I was led to the law library too, you know what I'm saying? So I was going to the law library. And, you know what I'm saying? And I was getting, me and my reppies, I had some reppies on the case. I was starting to learn certain things in the law library that I was taking back to my attorney and all that, you know what I'm saying, to my lawyer, you know what I'm saying? I had a PD. I ended up with a PD. I initially had a lawyer, didn't last, right? Because he stopped getting paid, and I ended up with a public defender that eventually didn't even like being called a public defender. He told me he was a lawyer and that he just did public work to help people. And he was very passionate. And this was some of the stuff that I'm learning in the law library, right? I'm learning stuff and I'm giving it to him, like thinking he probably ain't gonna take this from me, but he was taking it from me and stuff, right? You know, it's very important to plant seeds, family. Anytime you see opportunity and different, you gotta, whatever it is, you gotta try it. You gotta try it, because I'm telling you, like, I started going to the law library and taking stuff to him and running stuff by him, but he was also doing his thing on his end. When that merged with the presence of God, you know what I'm saying? Because remember, when two agree, family, you know what I'm saying? There, God is in the midst, right? He give you whatever you ask for, right? Man, before you knew it, the offers started coming in. Offers started coming in, like for me to have an out date and all that, you know what I'm saying? And for me to be able to, you know what I'm saying, actually be able to go home again and all that. That was a whole nother ball game for me, you know what I'm saying? So this is shortly after I remember releasing, like saying, you know, like, man, I remember having like a dialogue with the Most High, like, man, I ain't mad. I appreciate you, man. You don't owe me nothing, man. Ooh. You tried, man. You tried to prevent me from even getting here. You know what I'm saying? And man, not long after that, you know what I'm saying, with me going to the law library and all that, you know what I mean? That's why if you ever led to do something during whatever you're going through or whatever life, you know, stages you in and phases, whatever, or stages, if you ever led to do something like that seems to be something productive or that seems to make sense in some productive way or beneficial way, do it. You know what I mean? You never know how that might kick in, how that might be the very thing that makes sense for your situation or your life at the time. So I just know after that, I ended up going into motions, beating the motions, right? I like lost half of the motion, but won the other half of the motion and all that. It started to look a little more, you know what I'm saying, a little more freedom-like to me, you know what I'm saying? It started to look better to me, family, you know what I'm saying? And man, before you knew it, you know what I'm saying, I had an out date. I still had to go down to the penitentiary for some handful of more years, right? A few more years, but I got up out of there, man, and it all worked out, you know what I'm saying? But that was right then and there, like a very, it was a very, when I say outstanding, I mean it stood out to me moment. Like it was a very outstanding time and experience for me when it comes to the Most High God. You know what I'm saying? Because that was definitely way more personal. You know what I'm saying? Because I remember releasing, like, you know what I'm saying, when I was still in the county, saying, man, you don't owe me nothing, man. This ain't on you, man. This is something I did. Ooh. Like, I remember like that, because at this time, mind you, I'm old. I'm 20-something years old, so I'm able to remember and recall things and piece things together. I'm just like, man, I couldn't even believe how I won half that motion and all that. Like, you know, I ain't the type of guy that like could tell you I can read no, you know what I'm saying, go take, you know, do no court stuff or read no, like, that stuff worked out. it worked out because I believed that it could at the time. I don't want to say why, but I just know it worked out, family. And that right there did something for me when it came to the Most High. And it also, like, I had a lot of times where I just felt so blessed before I even was released, right? Just the way I was taken care of, just the encounters that I would have with, you know what I'm saying? I had some times, family, where I'm telling you, you know, I don't want to be, you know what I'm saying, get too off on the things that may be ungodly for you, family. Even though this ain't no religious channel, but I'm saying, like, I had some blessed times, like, you know what I'm saying, in the county too. You know what I'm saying? Like the provision, the things that I was able to do, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? From my movement to where I move around, you know what I'm saying, to the provision, right? The opportunities that was coming, like they was allowed, they let us go. We in the county, they let us go to the women's division and do a I forgot, it was kind of like a Black History thing. They don't really, this don't happen. This don't be, I ain't gonna say this don't happen, right? This ain't nothing like I ever heard of, man. They let us go to the women's division and do a Black History like play type thing. But we was beating drums. It was different, man. Like, just a lot of opportunity to be locked up. You know what I'm saying? And that ain't got nothing to do with the other stuff. I really don't want to put on this video because it ain't got nothing to do with, you know what I'm saying, necessarily positivity like that, right? But I had a lot of opportunity, things that was happening for me, right? And so after my case started to turn around and things started to look, you know, in a nutshell, it was a violent situation in the streets, just young teenage stuff in the streets, right? But when I was able to, like, get through all of that and kind of just the things like with the law librarian, how that played, because I went into motions before, you know what I'm saying, never went to trial, ended up going into motions and beating these motions and all that. And all these things played out, family. I'm like, man, no, it's something that definitely will help you, man. It's like, this thing ain't, I kind of started to know, family, this ain't had nothing to do with religious and traditional activity. Like, I started to see that this was something that was there for you, like, regardless, if you can comprehend it, if you can commune with it, if you could find your way into be in its presence. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you could just, I don't know how to say it, but I just know it was certain things, you know what I'm saying, certain moments that I was having where I felt like, what I was telling y'all, it was drawing me in, and I was digging deeper and all these things, that I started to realize, fam, I'm like, man, this ain't, I was able to look over my whole life to my remembrance, like, and see, like, this thing was always there for me, right? I started to feel like God, what we call God, right, was always there for me. I didn't need to be a Christian or, you know, at this time, family, don't get me wrong, I was still like, when it came to my belief, I was still Christian-like, right? I'm not saying I was a genuine, pure Christian or nothing, but that's what I would consider myself to be at that time if it came to my belief, right? You know, if I was asked what I believed in, right, it would be like Jesus and Christianity and all that. I didn't know, like, I didn't perceive things to the extent I do now. But I do know, I noticed that it didn't matter. Like, it didn't really, I'm not gonna say it don't matter what you do, like, you just do anything and think, but I just know, like, it was always there, right? It reminded me of that scripture, I knew you before you was formed in your mother's womb. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, man, it was just some, you know what I'm saying, that was one of the beginnings. Even though I still was like, again, I would think that I was more Christian-like than anything in my belief system. I was starting to develop a mindset like, man, this thing is bigger than religion and all that. Because I was able to see how it came to me, like it was coming for it was drawing me in closer to it when I wasn't paying attention. I mean, when I wasn't trying to, right? Like when I wasn't looking for it, right? You know how the Bible said, I chose you, you didn't choose me. Like it was coming to me, you know, palms up. Like, you know, the Bible said, come as you are. It was coming to me as I were. You know what I mean? It wasn't something that, because I didn't have no, you know, I had times where I was more consistently praying and stuff like that, but I wasn't ever really just like flat out, full blown, like, you know, Jehovah Witness or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I always was kind of like, I had my prayer, I had my Bible, I was into, you know what I'm saying, going, you know, clapping with the church songs and all that at times when, you know, but I wasn't, you know what I'm saying, like the way this thing came to me, fam, I just trying to say, man, I was able to peep that it wasn't, it was no respect of a person in the sense of, oh, you go to church every day or you do this. This thing was there for me when I was in the gangs, when I was doing things that had nothing to, you know, when I was getting weed and, you know, smoking weed in the jail and doing other things that didn't have nothing to do with that, family. You know, I mean, when I say nothing to do with that, but didn't have nothing to do with religious activity. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, I started to develop a mind, family. Tell you, like, man, this thing is something else to it, man, because it was working for me. It was, and I mean, when I say it was working for me, I don't mean like vaguely things were working out. Yeah, things were working out, but I mean like this presence, right? This divine presence was literally working for me, like going before me, making way. You know what I'm saying? Making way for provision. You know, picking my cellies for me. Like I could just see it was doing something in my world, and it had nothing to do with me picking up the Bible all the time or going to church or something like that. So don't mean that stuff, you know, ain't what it is. I'm just saying that was the beginning stages of me understanding that this entity, or pardon me, this divine presence was not waiting for you to join the game first before it gave you, you know, before it answered your prayer. I was able to know my prayers were being answered. My prayers are being heard in different times in life that I didn't even, you know, I wasn't going to church or nothing like that, right? So, with that said, family, I'm going to try to sum this up. I know it's already been an hour. That scripture to talk about those who didn't have the depth, that they wasn't able to go deeper. I was starting to dig a little deeper. All I did for the rest of those years before I got out is I just had moments where I would just be thinking, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would have moments where I would just have church in my mind, so to speak, where I would be thinking about the word, or I'd be thinking about what is true, what is God, and all these things, and how do we hear us, how do we connect with it. Just stuff that I used to meditate on, and I would have prayers sometimes I would go in the Bible and I look at scriptures and I'm digging deeper with my mind, trying to figure out what's more to it. And that was pretty much like, I couldn't tell you I was getting a whole lot from it, other than I was still coming out of those sessions feeling confirmed that, yeah, there's something more to it. But I couldn't tell you what more to it I was getting from it at that time. I got out, and I wish I could show y'all this picture, man, but the iCloud be scattering my pictures so much. Got out, make a long story short, over 15 years ago now. About 15 years ago, 14, something like that. Got out, family. And I was able to like hit the ground running, right? I was able to see things work a certain way when I wasn't, again, into the church stuff. I wasn't into the, you know, none of that stuff. It was just certain things, like when it comes to believing in yourself or faith, or I was able to see, and I'm gonna say this real quick before I let y'all go. I was able to see the difference between like the people that were out here, right? People that was out here already, they were going through things, right? Mind you, I'm coming from a place where I'm just happy to be out here so long. I ain't got the same worries and struggles y'all got, because y'all been out here, right? Y'all been going through stuff. Y'all trying to get through stuff. I don't got none of that. I have no children at the time. I was a teenager when I left. So I was just like on a different frequency. And I noticed how I was able to hit the ground running, right? And I paid attention to that. I'm like, man, it wasn't until after so many years of being out and I started, picking up certain experiences that people were out here experiencing, right? I started picking up certain experiences and picking up certain things that were slowly pulling me into their world, right? Me starting to have some of the same issues they was having. Me starting to have some of the same struggles that they were having. But that's what, after me being out here a little while and kind of picking up certain things from the world that was getting on me and also producing the same result. And I remember to this day, I'm still set apart. But I knew that, it's something that I have been given when I was in that place that I came out here with. And I must redeem that. I must get that back. Whatever it was that I had, that freshness, right? I didn't have the same mindset as somebody else said. Say for example, a woman or a guy that feel like everybody full of crap. You can't trust nobody. I wasn't thinking like that. Because I didn't have the same experiences, right? I knew certain things, right, that existed, but I wasn't in that space. I wasn't in the space of the average person that been out here going through things. You know what I'm saying? So I had a more optimistic flow, family. That's the key to that, right? Was very much optimistic. You know what I'm saying? And I was so happy to be out. And that my point is I was able to see the difference between my frequency, my thought process, like the things that I was thinking like to them, I was thinking I just wanted to have fun, right? I wanted to get money and have fun. People was into other stuff. People got a lot of stuff going on where they just trying to, some people trying to deal with, they got different stuff they trying to deal with. And you be like, what's wrong with them? Like, because they going through stuff or not necessarily they got always something going on, but they live like they always, dealing with something. Or they just had, not every single body, right? Not every single person, but a lot of the peers were in a similar place, right? That, they were looking at me like, man, how you do that? How you do that? And I was able to see, family, I'm son this video, I was able to see that I was on a different frequency. My feelings were different. I was more pure. I didn't have all the toxicity of the world in me, right? I didn't have a lot of, just heartbreak. I didn't have I wasn't heartbreak. I didn't have no wife or nothing I left out here. I didn't have none of those things on my heart, right? I was light on my feet. You know what I'm saying? I was happy to get up and go to job interviews and do this and do that, go get my license and do the things that I needed to do. I was having fun doing it. You see what I'm saying? I was in a different space, family, and it was giving me a different result. And I was able to polarize that later on, family, which led to where I am right now. And I was able to see that it absolutely had something to do with my belief system, what I believed about life, family, not just about a situation, but that too, but what I believed about life. I was happy about life still. I was excited to live. I was excited to get to the next thing, right? My frequency, my vibration, my feelings, my thoughts, all of that was way different. You know what I'm saying? And I'm still trying to get back there completely now. But I was able to see the difference from that right there. That was another thing that was a confirmation to me, like, man, this stuff ain't had nothing to do with religion or nothing like that. God is in you. The church is in you. And you must, Bible said, man must get his own house together first before you can help anybody else or, contribute to anybody else's. I got to get my house in order. And I understood that somehow when I was in there, before I got out, Most High had got my house in order. And to this day, I'm still trying to remember, meaning, put it back together, right? What he had done for me in that place and upon my release umpteen years ago. But I just want y'all to know, man, I was able to see that it was more to that Bible. This is what I was talking about the picture. I wish I had this picture. I don't know what year it was, probably 2014, I don't know, 13, one of them years. I was at the beach and all that with the family, you know what I'm saying, my sister and my mother. And we met up at the beach and just did a quick barbecue and all that. But anyhow, that day, and I just happened to have on all white that day too. Not saying that that's means anything, but it's very significant. I had on all white. And it was a light shining real hard, right, just from the sun, right, on me, like in this picture. But I didn't know then until I looked at the picture one day. I still got it. I'm sure y'all one of these days. And I'm like, man, look at that. That look kind of, and I'm telling y'all, ever since then, my life been, it's like I've been had a calling on me. I've been kind of like, I've been going through some stuff though too since then. You know what I'm saying? That's when I was getting a lot of synchronicity, a lot of stuff going on in my world. You know what I'm saying? Shaking me up, trying to get me in a place I don't know, you know, but it definitely drew me back to, you know, being in the presence of the divine, right? Trying to seek it in divine, seeking the truth, right? I went through some things where sometimes it seemed like, you know, prayer was working. Sometimes it seemed like this was working. Sometimes it seemed like that was working. Sometimes it seemed like this wasn't working. Sometimes it seemed like that ain't working. Family, I had in the last maybe 7 years, I have been going through some changes. But also that would remind me again that it wasn't about a particular religion or something. Most High say, knew you before you was formed in your mother's womb. That ain't no joke. Like, it was something about me that I had to understand, that I had to know. It had a calling on me. You know what I'm saying? But I was able to start seeing it. It was something much more deeper. The things that I was going through, the things that I've been through, right? My experiences. The Bible say, test everything. Keep hold of what's good. I was experimenting with different scenarios and stuff. And experimenting with thought. Experimenting in every way. Mentally and spiritually, that I'm talking about. Not with chemicals. And I was able to like see like this is just way bigger than something very supernatural was going on in my life, has been, and it's something that it has been there outside of, you know, committing to somebody's organization. And it had been faithful outside of that. It had been faithful and guiding me. Some of the things that I've learned, some of the things that some of the mental or some of the revelations that I've obtained, so to speak, right, or that has unraveled within me, like man, no, I don't know, man. This stuff just more and more just got deeper and deeper and deeper, and I was able to see spiritual phenomenons, family. I was able to see blossoming phenomenons happen in my life spiritually. And I'm just summing this up. Maybe I end up making a part two because I'm trying not to hold y'all too long because there's a lot of stuff I skipped trying to, you know, shorten it up for you, man. But I just know that I had a lot of experiences up until this point, right? That were hands-on experiences. And it's like you don't even always see what's going on until afterwards, and you look at like, dang, that did happen like that. I did do this, but you didn't realize, like, dang, I didn't, you know, you see what even the things that you did, you can see how you was led to do those things. You can see how it wasn't just you in the things that you did. You'd be like, man, yeah, I went to the law library, but something told me to go. Some, you know, I ain't the guy in the jail trying to help everybody with their cases. I didn't know that kind of stuff like that. But something in that moment in time led me for my case. You know what I'm saying? And you able to see, man, afterwards in life, like, man, this did happen like this, and I know it was something that told me to do. And all, you know, I just had a lot of phenomenons, found like, you know, what is it? Phenomenal phenomenons, you know what I'm saying? In my life, man, since very young age, you know what I'm saying? And things coming to me, people saying things to me, right? They're very significant leading up to this point. I had some hands-on experiences, family, with seeing faith at work. You know what I mean? And so I always tell you do have to plant seeds, you know what I mean? Because definitely the Most High comes in the form of opportunity a lot of times. You just got to know what that is a lot of times. And sometimes he'll just lead you in whatever it is that you have to do on your end, and you won't even notice it till afterwards. But I just know, family, that, you know, the scriptures say some on this path that wasn't able to be totally grown into the truth, they didn't have no depth. They didn't have no deafness, you know. They wasn't able to see or think or go deeper. And so that's a big part of what this first part, we're going to say this part one, is that I always knew it was something about going deeper, family. That's all I'm going to tell you, like with this video, you know what I mean? That's the first stage of me just little steps at a time, going a little deeper. And I had those particular few scenarios that drew my attention to go deeper. You know what I'm saying? And then that was just something that I couldn't get from Christianity. You know what I'm saying? You know how that go. Nothing against Christianity, but you know, sometimes they don't want you to go too deep, right? They don't want you to do all that. That's against their religion, and let them have that if that's what they feel. You know what I'm saying? And not all, maybe there's some true, you know, some Christians out there that truly understand the Bible on a certain level that do have deafness, right? That do understand what those scriptures are saying. So we can't even say that to all Christianity, but I just know for me, family, it was about going deeper. You know what I'm saying? It was about going deeper. From when I was a kid and I thought I saw a UFO, you know what I'm saying, to now, and just let this be part one, to go deeper. Like, that was, if I get nothing else out of that, something kept leading me to go deeper. And I think that's how I ended up in this place where it took some time for me to be sure of what the Bible was not saying. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to certain other people's beliefs and religions, I'm not against it, but I know what the Bible is not saying. And that's why I'm not this and I'm not that. Although I reference the Bible, I believe in the Lord, right? The truth, right? I'm a lover of the truth, disciple of it, right? I seek it all the time, right? I always talk about the Most High. And that was very significant too. Back when I told y'all, my mother used to tell me to read Psalm 91. Psalm 91 started out with, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High shall dwell in the shadow of the Almighty." And I want to say that to leave you with this, that there's many gods out there, family. There are many acting people, entities that want to be like the Most High, right? Or they want to be God in some form or fashion. And God's children are like gods, right? So I'm not saying, but he said he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. That's what I'm saying. That's very significant, family. Because when you come to find out that what God is asking you to do is to connect with the Most High. Not all these in-betweens. See, there's a lot of in-betweens, right? With religions and other people and entities. Like, there's a lot of in-betweens. People want you to go through them and go their way and do it how they did it and think how they think and believe what they believe. But he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, that's very significant. Go deeper. When you go deeper, you're getting closer to the Most High. He said it was no other God. He says no other beside me. Because the truth is holy, family. So I'm going to let this video go, man, because I kind of like feel like I held y'all long enough, man. But, man, it's a long story. I don't know how I thought I could have got even, like, I literally had to keep skipping over stuff just to get to this point. And it's already been a little while. But, yeah, I was led through certain experiences to go deeper. And I was able to see through certain experiences that hands-on presence and power. And it was non-partial. It was non-discriminative. But it is faithful. And I know it by its faithfulness, family. And let's make this part one. Till the next video, peace, positivity, optimism, power, and abundance. Water.